All right, there we go. Okay, so that's the meaning of resiliency in the pandemic and climate change world, because these kind of stresses and strains on social infrastructure are going to increase. So always have backups, a backup plan. And so we have this backup plan. And let's see if this, let me go open up my notes here. And go to methodology and go to lesson plan and share the screen. And here we go, the lesson plan. So this is what we were talking about. And all right, so then let me open up the notes for this today's reading. And so we're back to Trompenaars and Hampton Turner. And that's why I'm talking about corporations and being global. Globalization is a popular term that's I don't like, but is used a lot. So this is back to Trompenaars, Hampton Turner, and they come up with 4 ideal typical abstractions of corporate culture. And of course, supposedly all corporations have combinations of elements of these 4 ideal typical Weberian ideal typical types. The guided missile family, what is the other 2? The incubator and Eiffel Tower model, right? So, so what do they state here? That people will borrow from ideals or models that are familiar to them when they create an organization. And an organization is a subjective construct. What does that mean? It exists only in my mind, your mind. Catholic University of Korea exists only here, just like Korea exists only here, and Cambodia, and Belgium, and America, and Hermano's Pizza. They exist only here, right? On the basis of people's own particular cultural programming, they will give meaning to their organizational environment. So this Catholic University of Korea, I mean, speaking as an American, this is a very top-down place. I mean, it's like, I feel like I'm in the military here. And that, I don't know how much, I've not investigated that, how much that is the Catholic perspective versus how much that's a South Korean perspective, given Korea's history. That's until relatively recently, it was a military dictatorship. And 1987, I was 25 when Korea democratized. So it wasn't that long ago for me. So in other words, the organization will be something else that they have experienced. In one type of culture, they may set up an organization to resemble a family. And that's supposedly the Italian model, is the penultimate model of the family model. And of course, when I say, any of you see that film House of Gucci? I watched it on the plane back over here. Gucci, that was the family model company, right? The organization leader is the godfather. He's the patrone, right? You're supposed to respect it, and it's almost always a he, and he's supposed to take care of you. And there I can see elements that here in South Korea as well, that there are elements that, you join this organization, it's supposed to take care of you. But in return, you're supposed to be loyal. And that means, you don't say bad things about the organization outside of the organization. In another culture, they may set it up to resemble an impersonal system, which is they designed to achieve targets. That's the guided missile, right? You take the parts of the organization and you put them together in specific ways to achieve the particular objective of a particular project at a certain time, right? And yet another culture, they may set up to resemble to them a vessel that is traveling somewhere. I guess that's the guided missile. I guess, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm mixing these up. Well, maybe they're not really talking about the 4 models, but we'll get to the 4 models here in a bit. And then in yet a 4th type of culture, they may set up an organization to resemble a missile, which is pinpointing strategic objectives and customers. The meanings that people attribute to organizations and the models they give to organizations derive from their cultural preferences, which operate across the value dimensions, which we described in the previous chapters. And so differences in national cultures determine the type of corporate culture that people choose, reflected in 4 categorical types of organizations. So again, they go through this presentation of the different models of companies, cultural preferences of employees and leaders, as well as technologies and markets shape organizational culture. American, Asian, European, or Middle Eastern subsidiaries of one multinational corporation may be unrecognizable as parts of one corporation in terms of their respective cultures, aside from their shared reporting procedures and logos. So yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about Hyundai to know what Hyundai factory in Korea or Hyundai factory in China, how it differs from the Hyundai factory in Montgomery, Alabama. I assume they're pretty different. And it must be pretty different because that Hyundai factory in Montgomery, Alabama is pretty successful, which means there's not a lot of cultural conflict there, which is really pretty amazing. So 3 general aspects of organizational structure are especially important in determining corporate culture. And this, of course, relates, by the way, to our topic regarding your narrative projects, right? One of the research questions that you might want is, to the extent do Asian students adapt more easily to Catholic University of Korea in studying and living here than the non-Asian students because of cultural closeness, supposedly. Cultural closeness might be somehow measured or implied by Trompenaars and Hampton-Turner framework. So 3 general aspects of organizational structure are especially important in determining corporate culture. 1, the general relationship that exists between organization and employees. The defining of superiors and subordinates in terms of hierarchical or vertical system of authority. And 3, the employee's general view of the organization's purpose, goal, and destiny, as well as about their places in regards to them. So cultures in this study have so far been distinguished along single dimensions. For example, individualism versus communitarianism, or universalism versus particularism. To examine organizations, it is necessary to think in terms of 2 dimensions to produce 4 quadrants. That is, orientation to the task versus orientation to the person in the organization versus the task of the organization, and hierarchy versus equality. So that's interesting. It's nice to go through this 4th edition. I don't know if that's really been, I don't recall that in the previous edition. So they're being more explicit in this edition, in addition to try to get you to buy their software. It produces 4 categories of corporate culture. They vary significantly in terms of how they learn and think, change, motivate, reward, and resolve conflicts. These 4 images of organizations are ideal types. That's a Max Weber term. I mean, Trompenaars is a sociologist, so he knows all about Max Weber. These 4 images of organization are ideal types, which are abstract. Organizations typically have elements of more than one type, although one type from the 4 types may be more strongly evident. So we already mentioned the incubator, the guided missile, the family, and the Eiffel Tower. And that's the hierarchical military type organization. These 4 metaphors illustrate the relationship of the employees to the concept of the organization. So, of course, the organization belongs to a family. The organization well, we'll go on here. So, of course, there's been a lot of talk about the incubator. Like, how do you create the next Amazon? Is Coupang, an incubator? I don't know anything about Coupang. I haven't investigated this, but in terms of what can we learn from these startup experiences that become corporations that become the biggest company in the world, Amazon? I mean, I remember when that started. I mean, I was at the American University in Bulgaria, and it was not long after communism fell, and we had to teach these courses, and we had to get textbooks for these courses. And in the United States, the publisher will actually send you an examination copy, a desk copy of their book, so you can look at it and decide if you want to ask your students to buy it for the class. And they'll let you keep the book, but they wouldn't send those books to us in Bulgaria. Where the hell is Bulgaria? People knew nothing about Bulgaria, right? So, oh my God, how are we going to find books? How are we going to order books? I don't know how we can't go back. I can't leave. And then Amazon came online. Said, hey, you know what? You can go to a website and order books from Amazon, and the websites will describe the books to you. You can read part of the internet. Oh, wow, this is really great. And so Amazon was a great savior. And this is in the mid-1990s. This is like 1995, 1996. Oh yeah, Amazon's great, man. That's really great. And then the rest is history, right? So, the figure 11 below summarize the images which these organizations project. The incubator, that's the startup company, whether it be, a new company, who's going to become the next Tesla or the next new Amazon. Each image is an ideal type. In reality, each organization is mixed or overlaid, but with one culture that predominates. In other organizations, significant variety may exist among functional organizational subunits. For example, marketing and sales may have a culture significantly different from research and development. R&D means research and development, right? With these three extreme types, we can explore the basis for how employees learn, resolve conflicts, change, reward, motivate, and so on. In one culture, certain norms and procedures seem to be effective, but they lose their effectiveness in others. And it goes on here. This framework helps to explain why. What? Oh, well, they explain why. That's it. So you can see incubator, person-oriented culture, task-oriented culture on this side, and then hierarchical egalitarian on this side. And so, so the guided missile is not as hierarchical as the Eiffel Tower, right? That, who's ever in charge depends upon the project. The Eiffel Tower, you always know who's in charge. In a guided missile system, which tends to, I think, characterize most more American type companies, the person in charge depends upon the project that's being pursued. And of course, somebody has to appoint somebody to be in charge, but that can change depending upon the project. So the family culture, again, if you haven't seen that film, House of Gucci, with Lady Gaga is a star in it. She's one of the actors in it. You enjoy it. It's a good film. Starts off a little slow, but that's the stereotype of the family culture, of the family culture company. It is a metaphor for the type of corporate organizational culture, which at the same time has close face-to-face relationships, personal, but is also hierarchical. It's personal, but it's also hierarchical. There's the daddy, the patriarch, the abouji, and don't piss off the abouji. But it also hierarchical. The boss father has experience and authority which greatly exceeds the experience and authority of his children. And of course, big companies outside of fashion like Agnelli and Fiat, Agnelli family, they're all about, the family perspective. One of the big companies in Italy. It is especially so when these children are young. The result is a power-oriented corporate culture. The leader is viewed in effect as, this is an effective organization. The leader is viewed in effect as a caring father who understands the world better than his subordinates regarding what should be done and what is good for them. This is kind of personal coming from an Italian background. It's like, oh. This type of power is hopefully viewed benignly rather than threateningly. In this type of corporation, its work atmosphere is one in which performance is carried forward in a home-mimicking environment. Many aspects of the traditional family are recreated with the corporation. Ame is the major business virtue. It means a type of love among people of different rank in which the older indulge the younger and the younger reciprocate with respect to the elder. Always doing more than the contract of the agreement requires you to do is the essence, right? So then he slips into Japanese here. Senpai kokai, the relationship between the older and younger brother is the idealized relationship. And I assume that's also relevant here in Korea. I've heard people say, hey, Adu, that means brother when they're talking to somebody in the subway state. And yeah, that's how you summon somebody you don't know, you call them brother, right? The older person will typically be in charge because of promotion by age. The relationship is devoted and long-term to the corporation. The pleasure derived from such relationships in this corporate culture is a major part of the reason for working and resolving conflict and performing well. Pleasing your superior, your elder brother, is a reward in itself. I have to say, I can't really comment too much on what CUK is like because I am not Korean. So my whole experience here is like, I'm an honored guest, but I'm a guest. I don't know what goes on in this university, and they don't want to tell me. So this affection may not be visible to outsiders. The Japanese are often very restrained emotionally, but it is there. It may be conveyed in a subdued fashion, Japanese style. It may be conveyed quite emotionally, Italian style, with voice, face, and bodily gesture. The leader of the corporate organization with the family type structure, family style culture, sets the tone for the organization, establishing the modes of behavior and models the corporation's appropriate posture. Subordinates are expected to be loyal, to know intuitively what their obligations are, while the leader also is to empathize with his subordinates. Through the organization, and again, they're making a judgment in this book. None of these corporate cultures are better than the other. So this family, I mean, that's a theme throughout the book, that somehow we might think that this is kind of primitive and backward, because instead we should have modern, hierarchical, efficient, objective descriptions. And that's the whole theme in the book. That's an American stereotype. And it doesn't necessarily apply, and it's not even necessarily most efficient if you want to make success now or in the short term. Through the organization's members acting with one consensus at its best, power is exercised. Power is not necessarily over the subordinates, although it may be. The main sanction in this type of organization is loss of affection and place in the family. Rather than being legal or financial, pressure is social and moral. He goes on to state here, among nations who industrialized late, many corporations with family-type cultures can be found. For example, in South Korea, Spain, Singapore, Japan, Italy, and Greece. Many feudal traditions remain in societies in which the transition from feudalism to industrialism was rapid. Members of family-style corporate cultures take for granted the sheer amount of information and cultural content, so we can characterize them as high-context cultures. And joining them is difficult for outsiders because it's harder for outsiders to feel that they belong or know how to behave appropriately. And I've run into that. Like, if I emotionally express my view to somebody on a telephone here in Korea, they're likely, or even not, they think I'm mad at them. I mean, twice in the last 6 months, I was embarrassed because I was talking with somebody and he said, why are you mad at me? Totally unintentional, but they thought that I was berating them. I wasn't. Like, oh my God. And of course, we're trying to communicate in English. So high context cultures have more in-jokes, more family stories, traditions, customs, and associations. Such family-style cultural organizations may unintentionally exclude strangers while communicating in codes that only members understand. Relationships are generally diffuse. In all situations, the elder brother is influential, irrespective of whether someone else is better qualified or even whether the elder brother has knowledge of the problem. The event or issue may occur at work, in the cafeteria, outside of the workplace. Employees' well-being and happiness is the concern of the family-type organization. This organization provides housing for me, considers the size of the families of employees to determine pay and benefits to ensure they live well. You know, I mean, for an American, that's outrageous. You mean I get less salary because I'm single and don't have kids, but he gets more money just because he decided to have babies? How can that be fair? And I think it happens here too. I won't go into that because I'm single. Differential status and power are viewed as a characteristic of leaders themselves. That is, it is natural without relationship to tasks that they succeed or fail in doing. The metaphorical comparisons with the parent who remains the parent despite neglecting or failing in certain duties. You know, Abuji is not always right, but he's Abuji. The state, God, society may be the power that is above the leader. So these superior authorities politically ordain the leader with his authority, rather than his authority originating in the roles that he is to fill and the tasks he is to perform. So those who are in power are not unskilled or cannot do their jobs. Rather, the existing structure has to be justified. It's done so by bringing the requisite skills and knowledge to the power centers And then those power centers, the patrone, the godfather decides. So again, I don't type out the entire book in these notes. So I didn't, but I summarize or reference here very briefly the example that Trumpenar's claims is true, that this is actually what happened, right? That so hopefully you've read it. So the British manager in this case, in dealing with the Italian, did not see how this family model organization may not see itself as a functional instrument for processing complexity, but can nevertheless be capable of doing so. So the status of people, their degree of hierarchical status is ascribed does not depend on tasks performed by definition. This authority is unchallengeable in the family model. It doesn't not ultimately determine whether or not you're successful in your previous work. Therefore, a major focus upon catching the attention of the top people, making them comprehend and motivating them to act. In order to fulfill the status that is ascribed to senior managers who are older people, they must be briefed thoroughly and supported loyally in order for the status attributed to them to be fulfilled. So in sum, this type of family style organization works to justify its own initial suppositions. Okay, so time for you to do a little vote. And so let me open up the Cyber Campus and make sure I'm sharing the screen. So the methodology, of course, it logged out. I gotta log back in. And then we go to vote, and we go here, and then we go to, okay, so I have to find, you can see I set up here it is, okay. So how do you respond to this? And there's no right or wrong answer, right? So a leader in my organization, so I know you're young, so, but some of you have worked in organizations. One of you is a military veteran, right? So in terms of your experience in an organization, including in school or university, how do you respond to this question? A leader in my organization is A kind of a father, or B, a leader in my organization was someone who got the job done. What is your understanding of a leader in your organization? Your leader in your organization is a kind of like abuji, kind of father, or a leader is somebody who is there because that person gets the job done, whatever the job is. So please choose, and there's no right or wrong answer here. So, it's interesting that two people said a kind of a father, and then two people said someone who got the job done. Because again, reflecting my American background, this isn't something that Americans they would say that's corrupt. That's not right. That's wrong. No, a leader, and again, these are romantic stereotypes of self. Even though Americans say, no, we only value somebody who demonstrates they can get the job done. That's our romantic self-image stereotype. That's where we start. But of course, we expect the leader, even if we don't want to openly portray it and rhetorically express it and believe it, we want the leader to be concerned about the leader's employees. But when I say, no, you got to be, somebody gets the job done, that's the initial reaction. That's where you start. And that's the theme of the whole book, that there are differences, but there are differences along a continuum, but they're all different cultures are confronting the same challenges. And you as a corporate leader or organizational manager need to work to reconcile effectively and continually these cultural tensions. And if you do it, you'll be successful and you create value in a globalizing economy. You'll make money. You'll beat your competitors in market share and in market sales. And like I said, it's really easy to make mistakes. I told you, I'm Mr. Professor teaching methodology for international studies, and I made two mistakes in dealing with Korean staff, totally unintentional, I offended them because I raised my voice. I raised it because I was emotional. I was frustrated. I wasn't blaming them, but they go, well, what are you yelling at me for? I wasn't yelling at you. And I didn't even intend to do that. And I'm supposed to be the expert. So, so back to the notes. So how did all these managers paying all this big money to attend Trompenaars' workshops? Those what 40,000 or 100,000 people that have surveyed. So managers. So this is the response. Percentage of respondents opting to be let alone to get the job done. A leader is somebody who gets the job done. And so 97% of Australians, they don't view the boss as Big Daddy, right? Their initial reaction is, the boss is the boss because the boss, is there because he helps us we get the job done with this guy. And if he's in a way, he's not a good leader. And then at the other end is Egypt and Oman, Singapore, Venezuela. Let's see, let's look for East Asian country, Hong Kong. Look, Hong Kong, they really expect the leader to be a father figure, this Asian tiger. China, and I'm looking for Korea or Cambodia. And where's Italy? Probably somewhere in the middle. Oh, here, Italy. So Thailand. Yeah. So Curacao, island in the Caribbean Ocean. Okay, so at their least effective, family culture corporations drain the loyalties and energies of the top leader who requires adoration. The seemingly childlike faith of followers and their credulity fuels the charisma of leaders, giving the sense of power and confidence. Okay, so and this, of course, they have here people that drawing. What are they doing here? They're drawing. So you're supposed to, I guess, I don't know if we can really do this here in the class. You can see these are five types of pyramids, and so you're supposed to pick these pyramids as to what you understand an organization to be. What comes to mind when you think about your existence and experience inside of an organization? Is it like this? Or is it like this? And Americans like to believe this, right? But Catholic University Korea is more like this. And I don't see Korea here. Oh, so you see South Korea. It's more hierarchical. At least it is. All right. So at their most effective, leaders in family type organizations can catalyze and mobilize the deepest feelings and aspirations of their subordinates, multiplying energies in the organization. They avoid the depersonalization of management by objectives. That's an American trend, right? That's what guided missile organizations do, relying instead on management by subjectives. Most effective leaders in organizations with family type cultures resemble the leaders of effective social movements. Well, that's interesting. With regard to the members of these social movements, the aim is to emancipate, reform, reclaim, and enlighten them, and also society, like the civil rights movement or the feminist movement, and so on. They are essentially family type structures. I guess. You have charismatic figures like Martin Luther King Jr. in the civil rights movement in the US, or this building, Kim Soo-hwan, right? Named after Cardinal Kim Soo-hwan, played an important role in democratization in South Korea. They aim to resocialize members into new forms of conduct. this is the most effective form of the family type organizations. Since authority, that's interesting. Charisma is, he's implying this notion of charisma is tied up with family type structures, corporate organizational structures. Like, and of course, the most negative forms, of course, are, negative political charisma, like in the form of Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini before they started losing the war. So the entire society becomes a family type structure, and people's thinking about who we love. That's what I've heard old Germans say before they all passed away, talking about Hitler in Germany. Hitler made us feel good about being German again. He made us feel good about being German after all the humiliations and losses during and after World War I. Since authority is divided into project group organizational matrix type authority structures, family cultures have difficulty in dealing with those American notions of organizational management. Giving undivided loyalty is expected in organizations with family type cultures, but your function has one boss while your project has another loyalty in these types of structures. Working with a family relative would be easier in a family type organizational culture. That person would find relating to you at work to be easier. And then nepotism, hiring your brother or son or cousin, would be seen as reinforcing current norms, while a role or project culture would be prone to see it as a form of corruption and conflict of interest. So nepotism bad in American thinking. A person is less likely to cheat you if they are connected to you both at work and at home. So in these cultures, while universalism is weak, families tend to be strong. Like late feudalism, right? You got to have a patrone to take care of you. So again, another example, the he claims is true. So you can read that on your own. And in another case, that is true. The Americans can make mistakes with in the terms of the task orientation versus the family orientation in Venezuela. Of course, Venezuela used to be a big oil producer. So decisions should be taken by the most authoritative person present, not the one with the highest level of expertise in the family type culture. The manager who knows everything has much higher appeal among Italian, Japanese, and French managers. The important manager is assumed to have at hand precise answers to most questions which subordinates bring to him or her. He or she may not know everything, but the supposition that the manager does know everything requires that everything be discussed with him or her. The benefits are it facilitates learning by pushing information upward, which contributes to organizational as well as senior management learning. Therefore, one should not dismiss family type organizational cultures as relatively primitive, traditional, and feudal. Its intimacies can facilitate the processing of information effectively. And that's always the big organizational challenge, right? Processing information effectively. Wanting the chief father to have superior information may produce more desirable results than either expecting or wanting your chief to know very much. Mobilizing employees around their superior goals requires their faith, their knowledge, and their trust, and is necessary for a visionary leader. The family can supply all three. And these type of organizations tend to be concerned about the whole life of the employee, including like providing housing for them. And this goes on here. Intuitive rather than, well, let me do it, show you some examples. Fiat and the Anelli, of course, family, they are probably one of the most well-known large manufacturing multinational corporations in Italy. And it apparently has been successful in, well, meeting crises over the last several years, or at least a few decades. Fiat has been in some kind of ongoing crisis for, I think, as long as I can remember. And Fiat merged with Chrysler when Chrysler went bankrupt in 2008, an American company. And there was it had a very charismatic leader who carried out oversaw that merger between Fiat and Chrysler, Sergio Marchionne. He died recently. He's an example of a charismatic boss. He wasn't American, he was Italian Canadian. He died just a couple before the pandemic. And he is sort of legendary in terms of his success in pulling off this effective merger between Fiat, the Italian company, and the American company. Chrysler was bankrupt. Chrysler went bankrupt in 2008, and that made obviously merging with Fiat much easier. I think I might have mentioned this in the previous class. I remember 20 years ago, no, 25 years ago, Chrysler attempted to merge with Daimler-Benz, the German company, in the late 90s. And Daimler-Benz paid $55 billion. I remember the number, $55 billion, big money for, and this is 25 years ago. And it didn't work. You would think, well, German company, American company, they're Northern European cultures, it should work. And it didn't succeed. Most car mergers don't succeed. Most car company mergers don't succeed. And I'll show you a report on that. But when Chrysler, and then so they broke up right before the 2008 world financial crisis. Daimler-Benz spun off and separated from Chrysler. Then the 2008 global financial crisis began, and Chrysler went bankrupt. And so did General Motors. The US government stepped in, and they oversaw and supported the merger of Chrysler with Fiat. And evidently, well, Fiat has been making a lot of money off Chrysler brands. Chrysler owns Jeep. You know Jeep? Jeep is, people love Jeep brand in the United States because of its association with the American military vehicle that was used until 30 years ago, the American Jeep. And so they make a lot of money off Jeep. Now, this company merged with Peugeot, to create a new company called Stellantis. The point is, all of these companies, car companies, have to merge because they have to make hundreds of billions of dollars of investments to shift to electric vehicle production away from gasoline and diesel. So the whole world is supposed to shift and do it pretty quickly, very quickly. And this is going to require big, big money that no single company that exists today can do on their own, typically. And so there's this big push for these companies to merge. And then, of course, these corporate culture problems come into play. So let me highlight, let me open up another. This is a report from before the pandemic. Yeah, so Fiat Chrysler is a strong, well, let me make sure you can see that. So the point I'm getting to is, when are we going to see South Korean companies merge? Because this becomes an issue of economic nationalism, right? You saw conflicts between Renault and Nissan in Japan, trying to create some kind of global alliance, because these companies become standard bearers for national economic success. So Hyundai is not just a company, it represents Korean manufacturing prestige in the United States and the world. Samsung represents not just, computers and television screens, it is a national champion for South Korean economic nationalism. Same with the Japanese companies. So this becomes a very sensitive topic. Of course, that was also true with regard to Chrysler, but then Chrysler went bankrupt. It was like a dead corpse that Fiat could pick up. Fiat had a long history of collaborating with the United States after World War II. So it goes on here. Fiat Chrysler has a strong position in the United States with its Jeep and Ram brands, I already mentioned that, but has lacked the money to properly market the SUVs and pickups in promising new markets like the Middle East and Africa, says Michelle Krebs, a senior analyst at Auto Trader. Jeep has already demonstrated its potential in Europe since Fiat and Chrysler merged in 2014. Sales of Jeeps in the European Union rose 37% last year to 12,200 vehicles. With help from Renault, Jeep could push into more overseas markets. So there's been talk about more and more consolidation of these car companies. One thing I haven't heard, however, is discussion about Hyundai merging with somebody. And I read the New York Times business section every day. Renault lacks a deep portfolio of SUVs, one of the most profitable and fastest growing segments of the industry, which Jeep could provide. Renault is also all but absent from the high end of the market, another profit motive, while Fiat Chrysler has Alfa Romeo and Maserati. Though neither brand has excelled lately, Maserati sales fell 20% last year, while Alfa Romeo sales rose about 10% in 120,000 cars. There was only a tiny fraction of the market dominated by BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Audi. But they didn't end up unifying with Renault. They ended up unifying with Peugeot, another French company. But the point is that they had to unify with somebody. And these pressures have intensified with the rise of Tesla. Tesla is incredibly valuable, profitable company in terms of profitable. It has high stock evaluation because it looks like it's the future of the automobile industry. So all these other companies are trying to catch up with Tesla. And so here's the point here. Car mergers usually fail. That's due to culture, what Trump and ours is talking about. And the suspicion, anxiety, and hostility that emerges, particularly also with these big companies having nationalism that you want to erase, that Daimler-Benz wants to erase Chrysler's American essence. That was the charge. The American stockholders were complaining about Daimler-Benz not treating Chrysler fairly. It wasn't even just about money. It was about Chrysler is an American brand, an old American brand. Yeah, you know, Daimler-Benz, sure, they paid $55 billion, but that doesn't justify Daimler-Benz just devouring Chrysler. And again, these notions of national identity, economic nationalism, as represented by corporate national champions, official or unofficially. So automotive history is littered with failed alliances. No company knows that better than Chrysler, whose marriage to Daimler from 1998 to 2000 was a legendary failure. General Motors had alliances with Isuzu, Fiat, and Daewoo that amounted to little. The Swedish car maker Saab languished under General Motors ownership and eventually went out of business. Ford once owned Volvo and Jaguar and tried to link them with Lincoln in a premier automotive group. It flopped. But one merger has worked pretty well, Fiat Chrysler. In 2018, Fiat Chrysler sales in the United States increased 9%, largely because it focused on better selling sport utility vehicles and trucks. And it goes on here, but Fiat Chrysler also said it would take 6 years to achieve those savings. Analysts are skeptical about such synergies, especially since Fiat Chrysler said it wouldn't close any factories. In practice, attempts to cut costs often get bogged down in squabbling about whose engine and transmission is better, or whose employees should bear the pain of job losses. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and the conflict with China escalated. But Fiat Chrysler then decided they had to merge with somebody, and they merged with Peugeot, and it's now called Stellantis. So who do you think is going to be the most likely partner or joint alliance or even merger partner with Hyundai? I mean, Nissan, despite the conflict they had with Renault and Charles Ghosn, they are committed to that increasingly close collaboration with that French company, Renault. Who is Hyundai going to work with? Do you know? I mean, I don't know. I don't follow Korean media. So have you heard particularly the Korean students, have you heard anything about Hyundai forming partnerships or alliances? Like, what is Hyundai doing in terms of electric cars? Its own, but they don't have a partnership or agreement with any other corporation that you've heard about, or? See, I don't know if you told me this before, but I think you're the second person to tell me that there was talk between Hyundai and Tesla. Yeah. I wonder if they're big enough to be able to do this. I mean, GM is not merging with anybody, but I mean, the claim is that there has to be consolidation in the world automobile market. And so there's got to be fewer companies. There's going to be fewer companies. And because this is a vast undertaking to shift away from internal combustion engines to all electric vehicles. So interesting. Okay. So all right, so back to the notes. So I think that's the notes. So thinking, learning, and change. Intuitive rather than rational knowledge is more important in the family corporate culture. And it's also more concerned with the development of people rather than their utilization or deployment. Personal knowledge is more important than empirical knowledge of him or her. Knowledge is more by trial and error rather than by hypothetical deductive inferences like formal modeling that you might learn in some American business schools. He doesn't seem to have a high opinion of the MBA program, the Masters in Business Administration programs that are everywhere in the United States, the MBA program. And you would typically in the MBA program, you would study these hypothetical deductive inferences. Like I heard, for example, that I went to the University of Pittsburgh for graduate school, and they've got, of course, an MBA school. And next door to the University of Pittsburgh is Carnegie Mellon University, where Google is doing a lot of work to develop electric cars. Big engineering school focused on providing contract support to the U.S. Defense Department. And I was told in that MBA program, it's all math. It's all incredibly emphasizes formal modeling. So the MBAs vary from school to school. I know somebody who she was a student of mine at American University in Bulgaria, and then she was really smart. She was from Macedonia. And then she got into the MBA program at Harvard. And that's supposedly the most prestigious Harvard MBA program. She told me, she's probably exaggerating a little bit, that most of her time is spent going to parties where you network, you meet other important people, famous people who went to Harvard, and you go to cocktail parties and you meet these people. That's what she spends so much of her time doing, networking. So if you go to Harvard or you go to other high prestige MBA programs, you're paying for access to a social network. And that relates basically to some elements here, that knowledge isn't something that you bring through necessarily studying mathematical models and statistical analyses. Knowledge includes how you know, who you know to help you get something done. So research questionnaires are second to conversations, and these are preferred to objective data. Insights are preferred to objective data, which, sounds pretty qualitative. Rather than what is being done, who is doing it is more important in family cultures. So for example, Japanese invited to a meeting will want to know who will be there before asking about what are the details of the agenda. Who's going to be at the meeting? Getting key actors to modify policies is the essence of change in the power-oriented family model. So change is essentially understood to be political. Change occurs from top down in the form of charismatic appeals, inspiring goals, directions, new visions, and more authentic relationships with important individuals. Bottom-up change is unlikely unless it challenges the leaders in the form of an insurgency. In this case, serious concessions may occur. Training, mentoring, and apprenticeships and coaching are an important source of personal education, but they perpetuate the power of the family who provides it rather than challenging authority. And he continues here, family type style cultures tend to be sensitive to the political environment and respond quickly to it. So again, I think one of the reasons why Trompenaars is spending a lot of time talking about this is because he wants to attack the stereotype that these are somehow primitive, backward organizations. That rather the model is instead that Carnegie Mellon type university MBA model of business organization and management that you studied and involves formal modeling and mathematical statistical equations and so on. And again, another vignette or example, even within Europe, right? Case of a Dutch manager reforming a French subsidiary of a Dutch group who did not understand it is necessary to change the management team to bring about change in a culture family type organization. Expecting implementation of agreed substantive proposals is not sufficient to bring about change. You need to change the management team. If you don't change the management team, it's not going to, the change isn't going to happen, regardless of what we agree formally. So motivating, rewarding, and resolving conflict. Family members enjoy their relationships, so they may be motivated more by appreciation and praise more than by money. Paper performance, which Americans like, may threaten family bonds, which undermines its appeal. They rather socialize risk among family bonds, and it can operate well in environments that are uncertain. So in these family type models. On the other hand, intra-family conflict may block necessary change, which is their major weakness. Resolving conflicts depends upon the skill of a leader. Seldom are conflicts voiced publicly. The family is in turmoil if they are. Negative feedback is sometimes confined to special licensed occasions, and it is indirect. So for example, in Japan, you can criticize the boss while drinking his alcohol. So that's the special licensed occasion. I think that's true in Korea too. Like, you can get away with anything if you say, well, I was drunk. Oh, well, you're drunk. So. Avoidance of losing face by prominent family members is important. They are, after all, points of coherence for the entire group. The family model gives high authority to effectiveness, that is doing things, right things, rather than efficiency, which is doing things right. So again, yeah, that's a theme in that House of Gucci film, which you might enjoy watching, that the family culture broke down, and now there are no Gucci's involved. Nobody in the Gucci family is involved in running that company. It's a brand name that's run according to a different model. I assume more of a guided missile approach as they try to adapt to changing cultural needs of their customers in terms of providing products. But there's nobody from Gucci is involved in Gucci. They were pushed out, or they died, or they were put in jail or murdered. The Eiffel Tower culture. This is a bureaucratic division of labor is prescribed in advance, including various rules and functions. The type of the hierarchy coordinates these allocations. This is a supposedly, Eiffel Tower implies France, right? If everyone fulfills their function as the system envisions it, then the hierarchy coordinates these efforts. One supervisor can oversee the operation of several tasks. One manager can oversee the jobs of several supervisors, all the way up to the top of the hierarchy. So again, the Eiffel Tower is used because it's a metaphor, because it symbolizes a system: broad at the base, robust, rigid, and stable, narrow at the top, steep and symmetrical between the two. It is the symbol of the machine age. The structure is more important than the function. That's interesting. In the Eiffel Tower system, the boss is only incidentally a person because he or she is a role. the boss could drop dead and someone would replace him or her, and the duties would remain the same and have no impact on organization's reason for being, unlike in the family culture, right? The person may be more or less liked or disliked, and the interpretation of the role may be slightly different, but the difference it makes is marginal. The job is defined, is evaluated according to the definition of the job. So I see elements of the Eiffel Tower culture also in Korea, right? The idiosyncrasies of the individuals have little effect intentionally. So therefore, authority stems from the occupancy of a role. Relationships are specific. Status is ascribed based on the role people have. It's the status is ascribed to the office position the person holds, not to the person, him or herself. It is not personal ascription as in the family model. And so the ascription is therefore impossible to challenge. The bureaucracy, therefore, in the Eiffel Tower model is a rational legal system. It is depersonalized. Everyone is subordinate to the local rules. These rules uphold a hierarchy, and this hierarchy upholds and enforces the rules. The boss is powerful only because the rules approve this person having the power to act. And so professional qualifications may assist careers in Eiffel Tower companies. For example, German and Austrian firms typically follow Eiffel Tower models. On the doors of the offices, the educational degrees, including professors and doctors of the occupant, is included. So, you'll see how many degrees this person has listed on the office where that person, the door on the office where that person is working. This is extremely rare to display in the United States. In fact, American politicians, they avoid highlighting their formal legal qualifications. I mean, I remember Bill Clinton's, when he was president, his first Secretary of Defense was a former congressman named Les Aspin. And Les Aspin had been in the Congress, and he had been on the House Armed Services Committee for decades. So when Bill Clinton, a Democrat, became president in 1992, he selected Les Aspin to be his Secretary of Defense because he has all this background experience for years and years, maybe decades, serving on the House Armed Services Committee, being the chair of the House Armed Services Committee. And then he was forced to resign due to the humiliation of the attack of the Americans in Somalia. That was the theme of that film, Black Hawk Down. It came out 25 years ago. He was blamed for that, and he was forced to resign. Okay. Then he died a few years later, and only in the obituary did they note that he had a PhD in political science. Like, he didn't tell anybody. It wasn't highlighted that Les Aspin is Dr. Les Aspin. He's got a PhD. I didn't know until he was dead. Because Americans don't like hierarchy. But in Europe, in Germany, in Bulgaria, if you've got a PhD and you're a politician, you will put your PhD on your campaign literature. I saw it in Bulgaria. If so-and-so had a PhD, there was Dr. So-and-so is running for prime minister. The Eiffel Tower culture rejects almost everything that the family culture accepts. It views personal relationships as sources of problems rather than benefits, because personal relationships cause judgments to be biased, they cause favoritism, they generate exceptions to the rules, they blur the boundaries between roles and responsibilities. Your ability to evaluate your subordinate's performance if you become fond of your subordinate or if you must have his or her personal loyalty to do your job. So your ability to evaluate decreases. My need for power or affection is logically separate from the organization's purpose. And my personal needs in the Eiffel Tower model are a personal agenda that are intrusions, distractions, and biases against the public agenda of the organization. And so at each level of the hierarchy, the organization describes each role. The organization rates its role for its difficulty, responsibility, and complexity. A salary is then attached to it. the organization then undertakes a search to fill that position with the right person. The organization's personnel department then treats each applicant neutrally and equally. It will then match each applicant's aptitudes and skills with the job requirements. It will then, in this ideal typical image, award the job according to the best correspondence between the job and the hired applicant. The same procedure is then followed in evaluations, promotions. And okay, so we have another question test coming up. Trumpenars and Hampton Turner tested the prevalence of the role culture in organizations as opposed to the more personal culture by groups of national managers. So what's this here? Okay, so let me ask you a question. Go to share screen. So we go here to the, sorry, page, okay, the bottom here. So two managers talk about their company's organizational structure. Which one of these two ways usually best represents an organizational structure? So there's no right or wrong answer. Please choose one. One says the main reason for having an organizational structure is so that everyone knows who has authority over whom, versus B. The other says the main reason for having an organizational structure is so that everyone knows how functions are allocated and coordinated. What feels more right to you personally? Which of these do you choose? So only one person has chosen A. The main reason for having an organizational structure is so that everyone knows who has authority over whom. Most of you chosen B. The main reason for having organizational structure is so that everyone knows how functions are allocated and coordinated. So let me then go back to the notes and see what the findings are in sum for everyone else. And so this is the percentage of respondents opting for the role rather than the personality. So I think that means what? So this is the B, right? This is the percent who chose B. So 94% of the US people chose B. And in Greece, only a third, less than a third, chose B. In Greece, they think an organizational structure serves this. So, and that's true in China as well, in Malaysia. As we go through this list, some of these, of course, China is developing quite rapidly. So is Singapore, Romania, Russia. I'm looking for Korea, always looking for Korea. I think on one time I saw a response that included a graph that included Cambodia, but I haven't seen one since in the book. Japan, a little bit higher, right? So he goes on here. Northwest European, North American nations show the most attraction, chose by large minorities B. So in terms of subordination, the logic of it as expressed here is rational and coordinative. Thereby, the organization legitimates existing power differences. In option A, the logic of subordination is unspecified. So in terms of subordination, in terms of creating a hierarchy, right? I'm higher on the hierarchy than you. This is expressed in terms of rational coordinative action universalistic principles, mechanistic principles. The Eiffel Tower structured company, the goal in the Eiffel, the goals is to be achieved, but are specified. Therefore, it has difficulty in pointing in different directions, like in responding to a crisis. The structure will impede achievement if the goals that are inconsistent with the coordinated hierarchical roles, then, like, for example, inventing new products. So the structure tends to being creative, or a problem in terms of creating new products that can break into new markets. If the rules are devised in advance and consistent treatment is legally required, then the Eiffel Tower structure is well designed. According to this model, structural organization represents a strategy according to the Eiffel Tower culture. So, for example, a German company representative gave a 60-minute talk on his company's strategic planning. And so he's giving a talk on strategic planning. Business administration courses and business administrators, they talk about strategic planning all the time. He spent 45 minutes explaining how the organization was structured in his presentation of strategic planning. He spent 15 minutes discussing specific strategic issues. So in other words, for him, structure was strategy, which, I mean, for an American, that would be a bit odd. And then in terms of organizational thinking, learning and change, because that's what we're all about these days, right? In this book, which was published right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so we're all about learning and change today. In contrast to the family model, the role-oriented Eiffel Tower company demonstrates significant differences in its processes regarding how people think, learn, and change. Eiffel Tower employees view the family culture as corrupt, conspiratorial, cozy, corrupt, irrational, and arbitrary. The family culture suspends competitive interaction completely because the family organization shifts its goalposts. It does not have objective benchmarks according to which employees agree to conform. It does not follow set procedures that everyone can understand. To qualify for higher positions, not to mention to fit in a role, means acquiring the skills necessary according to the learning model in the Eiffel Tower company. People are human resources, similar to cash and capital resources. They can be deployed and redeployed according to their skill sets. Their skill sets can be classified and developed so organizations have training programs, appraisal systems, assessment centers, manpower planning, and job rotation. By changing rules, the Eiffel Tower brings about change. Employees must change what they are formally required to do, along with change in the company's purpose. As a result, the company does not adapt effectively to turbulent conditions. And changing rules continually, while technically possible, also tends to lead to low morale and employment bewilderment. Distinction between rules and deviations would blur. So change in Eiffel Tower organizations is time-consuming and complex. So it'll be interesting to see how Stellantis functions, since it unified with a French company, Peugeot, this American, Italian, and it just happened. It was just announced a year or two ago during the pandemic. So is Stellantis going to transform itself into an electric vehicle manufacturer? Well, it better, because everybody else is moving in that direction. And interesting to see. You know, come to think of it, I mean, I see lots of New York Times reporting about how Ford Corporation is developing its electrical vehicle capabilities, whereas GM is focusing more on batteries. And I think there's partnerships with LG, and Korean companies building battery factories in the United States. But I haven't come across reports about what Peugeot is doing. I mean, what Stellantis is doing. So change in Eiffel Tower organizations is time consuming and complex. Restructuring and rationalization are terms that are dreaded here. And when you have to do that, when you have to restructure, procedures and job descriptions must be revised, manuals rewritten, promotions reconsidered, and qualifications of individuals reassessed. Oh my God. Wholesale personnel changes, including firings and layoffs, usually accompany it. These organizations constantly resist change until it becomes inevitable, at which point is a crisis time. Like, and I mean, you think about that. Chrysler, it's got Jeep. Like, I haven't seen anything in the New York Times business reporting about electrical vehicle production by Stellantis. And they've got Jeep, the penultimate American vehicle. So, yeah, so I guess the guided missile culture, this is like the typical American model. It is egalitarian, which differentiates it from the family, but resembles the Eiffel Tower model in that it is impersonal and task-oriented. It is like the Eiffel Tower in flight. The rationale of the latter is means, while for GM, the guided missile culture, the rationale is ends. So the Eiffel Tower focuses on the means, the guided missile culture focuses on the ends. Everything must be done to achieve your targets, including restructuring, reorganizing. Teams or project groups typically undertake these tasks. So that's all American, right? Project manager, project groups. The jobs that members do are not determined in advance of the task. Everyone must do what it takes to finish the task. What they must do is often unclear and requires discovery. Everyone is equal. Groups will have leaders or coordinators, but these generalists may know less about the specialists in each discipline. So the group is egalitarian because all know that at some point a particular individual's expertise may be necessary to change the direction of the group in order to reach its target. They're frequently cross-disciplinary and they draw on professionals, making them expensive. So you got to hire people who are experts that you need for time. So you have to hire all these consultants. And then relationships are fleeting and largely instrumental to bring the project to a conclusion. Yeah, I mean, America is all about consultants, like forming a consultancy and as experts in particular specified fields and being brought in I think the French are more in-house focused. So are the family cultures. Relationships are fleeting and largely instrumental to bring the project to a conclusion. Memberships are multiple. Relationships are effective, not effective, or committed. You don't have an emotional attachment, an emotional loyalty. The culture is neutral. In practice, to give the guided missile culture permanence and stability, it is superimposed on the Eiffel Tower structure, producing what is called the matrix organization. So one line of reporting in terms of what you're doing is to one's functional boss, and a second line is reporting to one's project head. You are therefore pulled in two different directions, which you must reconcile to produce quality functional work like electrical engineering, while also producing low cost and viable project as part of a team project, auto emissions control. So that's interesting. These Eiffel Tower organizations, maybe the most famous one is Volkswagen. And they got into that's the biggest car company in the world, right? And they got into big trouble because they decided to just lie about their diesel. I mean, this is amazing. I remember when I was in Bulgaria, lots of people with money they would buy a car and they would buy a diesel car. And I remember reading for years about how diesel's great. Diesel vehicles with diesel engines are so much better than gasoline engines because they're less polluting. They're less polluting. And the fuel for diesel is cheaper than the fuel for gasoline, and it's better for the environment. And so over half the cars sold in Europe were diesel, not gasoline, diesel. Very few in the US. And there have been efforts to promote diesel, and people are saying, well, we should try to promote diesel because the fuel is cheaper and it's cleaner for the environment. And then we find out it's all a lie. They're not cleaner than gasoline cars, gasoline engines. And it's a lie because a company like Volkswagen deceived everybody through coming up with cheats, deceptors to lower their outputs when they're being tested by government regulators. And so these people are still being arrested and tried right now. I think the leader of Volkswagen South Korea, he was arrested by the South Korean government. And everybody bought into this. Like everybody was buying diesel. And it was not true at all. They're not cleaner. They're dirtier than gasoline engines. The whole world was fooled by this. And then the pandemic came and everything changed. And said, well, yeah, okay, they made these mistakes, but we're going to now go to electrical vehicles. So let's let bygones be bygones. But no, these managers and directors of Volkswagen are being arrested, fined, threatened with jail time. But like everybody in the whole planet was fooled. Amazing. You just learning, thinking, and change in these kind of organizations. And we only have a few minutes left here. So it is cybernetic in nature. That is, it homes on its target through feedback signals. The focus is on new means, not new ends. So steering is conservative. Learning involves getting on with people, learning how to cooperate with people you don't like. It's not supposed to matter whether or not you like them or not in a guided missile culture. We're here to work. Breaking the ice quickly, becoming acquainted with people, being practical instead of theoretical. Americans are all about pragmatism, right? Being problem-centered rather than discipline-centered. Performance evaluation is usually by peers or subordinates rather than someone higher up in the hierarchy. Change tends to come quickly because the target moves. More targets appear, so more groups are formed and old groups dissolve. Individuals jumping from group to group tend to change from project to project. Personnel turnover tends to be high. Loyalties to professions and projects are greater than loyalties to the company. It is the antithesis of the family culture. And motivating, rewarding, and resolving conflict. Motivations tend to be intrinsic within the guided missile culture. That is, team members tend to be enthusiastic about and self-identify with the final project and the struggle to attain it, the greatest smartphone available, for example. High participation is necessary, otherwise there will not be widespread commitment. Individualism, so high participation in decision-making. It's not just follow the orders of the manager. Individualism characterizes the culture. A wide variety of specialized people are working together on a temporary basis. The only constants are the respective personal lines of chosen professional development that each individual has chosen. Management by objectives is the language that people speak here. And the incubator culture that everybody applauds these days, right? Organizations are secondary to the fulfillment of individuals. Existence precedes essence, according to existentialist philosophers. So also existence precedes organizations. Organizations are tolerated only as incubators for self-expression and self-fulfillment. They have almost no structure at all, since their function is to free individuals from routine activities so that they can engage in more creative activities. The incubator culture organization is therefore both personal and egalitarian. The roles of other individuals, however, are important. Their job is to develop, criticize, find resources for, confirm, and help complete the innovative service or product. The culture is a sounding board for innovative ideas and attempts to respond effectively to new initiatives. These entrepreneurial organizations typically are founded by a creative team that quit a larger employer just before completion of a project. These people are highly individualist, and organizational loyalty is not an important value for them. So they quit just before they finish their project to set up their own company, free riding on the resources of the large organization that they use to come up with their new idea. This happens all the time when I read the American newspaper in the business section, New York Times. And sometimes It infuriates the corporate company that they left, and they get sued. Like, I think Google sued somebody that was setting up their own electric vehicle company after they did all this work for Google, claiming they stole our industrial secrets. They stole this intellectual property from us. So we sue them. But it happens a lot in the US. These large organizations, therefore, often find themselves successfully undermined in the way I just described. These organizations can be consultants, legal partners, doctors in group practice, or any group of professionals who generally work alone but like to share resources while comparing experiences. Some observers see incubator culture companies as the wave of the future. Other observers see any decline in Silicon Valley as evidence that maturity threatens the existence of these organizations. They point to the rarity of the supposed rarity of these organizations outside of the Anglo-Saxon world, which are enclaves of individualism. These organizations have minimal hierarchy along with minimal structure. The authority which individuals command is strictly personal. Yeah, so Silicon Valley is supposed to be the homeland of the incubator culture, right? The authority within them is strictly personal. Others gain inspiration to work with them through the authority of individuals having ideas that are exciting and inspirations that generate incentivizing others to work with them. They have minimal hierarchy, but powerful emotional commitment to the products that they are creating, which they believe will revolutionize or save the world. The journey is the reward, and that they tend to believe that their products are potentially world-changing, society-redeeming. So, for example, personal computers will give power to the person. Gene splicing technology will save crops and lives, as well as rescue the economy, while generating an odyssey into the unknown. Ooh. The incubator can at best be ruthlessly honest, nurturing, effective, therapeutic, and exciting, but it can be hard to repeat or sustain. Once the project succeeds, new people, strangers must be hired. It typically becomes difficult to communicate with more than 75 to 100 people. Okay, so I think we just about are out of time here. In terms of the problem itself in these organizations is reopen the definition in terms of how they learn, think, and change. As change can be fast in an incubator culture with the membership attuned to each other like in a jazz band. The self-elected leader tries something new and the band follows the theme, ignores it, or if it does not. The customer has any defined target so that the problem itself is open to redefinition. The solution to a problem is typically generic, targeting a universe of applications. They tend not to survive altered patterns of demand. The heroes of the company typically remain the designers of the novel products long after the focus of the company shifted to customer service. So, Mark Zuckerberg is apparently trying to remake Facebook according to incubator culture with his new focus on Meta, right? The overriding motivation is an unfolding creative process, not personal security or profit. Leadership is achieved, not ascribed. Those whose ideas are most impressive and effective become the leaders. Power plays in office politics is reviled, hated, but it happens anyway. Conflict resolution occurs through splitting up or trying proposed ideas to see which one works. Okay, and so the point is that the four types here seldom exist in reality. They are pure ideal types. In practice, they are mixed or overlaid with one culture predominating, right? So we already said that before. Smaller companies are more likely to have the incubator and family forms. Large companies will move towards Eiffel Tower and guided missile cultures, okay? Okay, that's it for today. And see you for the debate on Friday. Bye.